remind me of. I love gospel music. Well, good morning, everyone. And for those of you who arrived a little late, I mentioned before that today is our community meeting, so we're having an abbreviated service. We should probably be through by 10:45. We'll take a 15-minute break for fellowship in the kitchen, and then we'll start the meeting between 11 and 11:10. Okay. So, as you know, those who have been coming, I've been doing a series called Tales That Teach. Well, I'm continuing that today with a tale or a story that is spreading around the Unity Minister community, and I hope you'll get a chuckle from it. Most of us have met at some time or another in our Unity career, or probably in the early days of Unity, that whenever something good happened, or whenever somebody got what they wanted, they'd say, divine order. So today I'm telling a story about divine order, and I'm going to need your participation. So whenever I do this, I want you to all say, divine order. I want you to shout divine order. So let's try.
Divine order.
Perfect. Okay. So here we go. There was a church that had grown so large that they needed to build a new building. They called on the most talented architect in the area and told him that he was commissioned to build the perfect church. And they wanted it to be so that everyone would agree that it was the perfect church, and that they would agree that it was in
divine order.
The architect realized that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, because he was going to build something that was going to be so magnificent, it was going to enhance, it would leave a historical legacy. He accepted the challenge, but he had a few stipulations. First, he wanted to interview the church in separate groups. He wanted to interview the minister, then the ushers, and then the congregation. He wanted to interview them all separately, and none of these groups were to tell the other group what they had shared with the architect. So what did they tell the architect? Well, first he interviewed the minister, and the minister told the architect that there were too many people sitting all the way in the back, and no one sat in the front. The ushers told the architect that they would never get the congregation out of fellowship hall to get into the sanctuary on time for the service. They did fellowship before instead of after, and then as they broke into groups after the service and all went out to local eateries. And so the congregation told the architect that the minister had a really bad habit of not sticking to his notes and running over. And that caused them to have to wait on long lines when they got to their local eateries. So everyone else would get there before them. Well, the architect assured each group that he would solve their problems, but he had one more stipulation. He wanted to build a church without anybody seeing it. He didn't even want them to drive by the location where the church was being built. And they said, okay, we'll agree. And they did. So 6 months later, the architect came to a Sunday service and told them that the construction was done. Everyone had kept their promise. They had not shared what they told the architect. They hadn't told anybody. They hadn't even driven by the new church. So the next Sunday, the first one to arrive was the minister. He was immediately impressed with how beautiful the new building was. He had never seen a church so impressive, and the inside was absolutely magnificent and just as beautiful as it was on the outside. In the front, there was an elevated podium that he was to speak from. But the minister did see one glaring mistake. There was only one row of pews, and that was all the way in the back. So, of course, the minister was upset, because that was his major complaint, that everybody sat in the back. So he told the architect, and the architect said, relax, everything's in
divine order.
So the minister sat down at that magnificent chair that was at the lectern, because the service was going to start in a few minutes. Just then, he saw flashing lights in the hall, and he heard horrible screaming and alarms going off. He looked at the architect, and the architect said, don't worry,
divine order.
In less than a minute, the ushers came running in, and they had smiles, huge smiles on their faces that the minister had never seen before. And quickly the congregation followed. So they all came in on time. Later, the ushers told the minister that at exactly 5 minutes before the service, all the chairs in the fellowship hall collapsed, and all the refreshments automatically dropped out of sight into the cabinets. And last but not least, there were flashing neon signs that attack dogs will be released in 1 minute. Please evacuate to the sanctuary. For the first time in history of the church, the ushers were able to move the congregation into the sanctuary before the service started. Later, when the ushers described how wonderful this Sunday was for them, they all agreed that they had experienced what could only be described as
Divine order.
The first few dozen people walked into the sanctuary, and they filled up the pews in the back, and then suddenly those pews moved all the way forward, and then another row popped up in the back. And as soon as that was filled, those seats moved forward. So there was no one sitting in the back. The front was full. This is the first time the minister could remember having no empty seats up front. So the minister had one thing to say as he realized what was happening.
Divine order.
Things were going so great that the minister realized that he was more inspired than he had ever been before. He was in such a state of spiritual exaltation that he began to remember more stories and more scriptures and more points that would enhance his original sermon. He knew that he was going to definitely run over this Sunday. Well, he always ran over, but this Sunday he was going to run over by a half hour. And just as he had that thought, the bell chimes rang at 11:30, which is when the service was supposed to end. And he said, "But wait a minute, I'm not finished. I have more to say." And just as he said that, and just as he heard the last chime, the platform started to shake, and it started to move down, and he disappeared. Disappeared onto the platform. The congregation all stood up because they were going to get to the eateries early, and they were going to be first in line, and they said everything is in
Divine order.
Yes. And that's an example of divine order when we get everything it is that we think we want. But even with that, there were little things that happened. Like the people that sat in the pew didn't want to sit all the way in the front. They had no choice. They had to sit in the front. So there were other things going on besides what it was they thought they wanted. And it's easy to say things are in divine order when good things happen or things happen the way that we want them to. But that's not what divine order means. First, we have to understand that divine order is constant. It never changes. Regardless of the outer appearances, divine order is always in play. What we do in the physical world is we confuse spiritual reality with physical reality. We choose and confuse the inner with the outer. We confuse what's called level confusion, the absolute, which is the realm of God, to the relative, which is the realm of the physical world. So here's an example. Scripture teaches that we're made in the image and likeness of God. But we know that that's not our physical qualities that are made in the image and likeness of God. It's our spiritual qualities, our internal qualities, that which Jesus Christ fully experienced and realized in the physical world. God is not a man in the sky with a physical body. So when we think of ourselves as being in the image and likeness of God, we know it's not physical. We know it's beyond the physical. Our physical bodies are manifested through the filter of human consciousness. And what we tend to do is filter everything in the world through our physical consciousness, our human consciousness, our humanity. We fail to see the truth of the situation when it's happening. Divine order is divine order. It's not about what's happening in the world. It's about what we do with and how we interpret what's happening around us. Just as our physical bodies are manifested through the filter of human consciousness, our perception of divine order is manifested through human consciousness. We see things through our perception, which only exists in the world of form. Divine order is divine order. It's the law of the universe, much like the law of attraction or the law of mind action or the law of cause and effect. Divine order is an aspect of divine mind. And since universal mind is flowing through us at all times, there is always divine order. It's only perception, human perception, that judges, that says something is negative or something is positive. Rather seeing it all as being neutral and an opportunity to learn and grow. Unity minister and author Eric Butterworth describes what he calls horizontal thought versus vertical thought. And we can equate that to our experiences of divine order, or what we perceive is in divine order when we perceive something's not. Because as I said before, everything is in divine order. In one of his lectures, when describing vertical and horizontal thought, he says, one deals with information, the other with inspiration. One deals with things as they are, the other deals with things as you are, meaning internally, meaning your state of consciousness, your spiritual self. He says one deals with this in the way it is, and the other deals with it with the idea that I have the capacity within me to see things differently and affect change in my life. He goes on to say that the horizontal thinker reads the paper and says things are awful, the world is awful, but the vertical thinker sees the same things, and instead of reacting to them, he recognizes the power of his thoughts. And essentially, as a positive thinker, he thinks the kind of thoughts that he wants to see manifest in the world. Now, you know where we're going here. Horizontal thinker is just physical world. Vertical thinker rises above, raises the consciousness to truth principle, practices what unity teaches, sees beyond the world of form. He goes on to say, instead of being problem-oriented, the vertical thinker becomes solution-oriented. He says that if a person is always reacting and complaining about how horrible things are, then that person in consciousness is part of the problem. In vertical thinking, the person sees those same conditions but knows that he has the power to see them in a positive way, that he has the power to get in tune with a higher dimension. And in that consciousness, he can begin to inject into the general media of world affairs a new positive attitude, and he then becomes part of the solution. Eric Butterworth goes on to say there will be no solutions in society until we begin to think vertically about the things that happen. The vertical thinker doesn't close his eyes and deny that things are happening in the world. He does as Jesus said, to be in the world, but not of it. The vertical thinker is aware of what's going on within them. They know that they have the choice to be part of the problem or be part of the solution. They know that the positive, creative universe is within them, and they can affect change. They know that they have the capacity to keep themselves in perfect peace and to spread that peace within the world of form. And he says that that's the only way the world is going to change. You know, I always say there is nothing out there. All that exists is within each and every one of us. We are constantly mirroring for one another, and we always have a choice to align with fear and the world of form, or to align with spirit and the world of truth, and to practice that, to be that, to own that, to know our true nature and function from that level. Yeah, in that story, the minister, the ushers, and the congregations all hailed divine order because they got what they wanted, but they were engaging in horizontal thinking. Divine order is permanent and unchanging. It is always present, just like God. And yes, there will be things that we see happen in the world that we will label as bad. But within divine order, those instances are opportunities to continue with our own personal growth and our own spiritual growth. We utilize vertical thinking to rise above those things that happen in the world. It's no accident that order is one of the 12 powers. As written by Charles Fillmore, we have to understand that we are always in the right place at the right time. And we need to learn from our spiritual growth. Lean on the 12 powers. Call on the power of spirit within us to rise above and move beyond anything that's happening to us. Eric Butter, I love this phrase. Eric Butterworth says, our job is not to set things right, but to see things rightly. How many of us, when something goes wrong, we want to fix it? We got to fix it right away because it's so uncomfortable. But that's not seeing it right. We're always in the physical world trying to set things right. But as Eric Butterworth says, our only job is to see things rightly. To know that there is divine order to the universe. To know that everything that's happening is an opportunity for us to learn and grow and to rise above. To practice forgiveness. How many forgiveness opportunities have you had lately? It's what we do with those instances that make a difference. It's how we rise above the circumstances that appear to be here. When we put God first and change our thoughts from horizontal to vertical, that's when we will truly understand divine order. Now, I could go on, and there's more things I want to say, but I'm afraid that this is going to start shaking, and the platform is going to go below me, and there's no basement to this building. So, with that, I'm going to invite you all now to close your eyes as we move into meditation. So just put your feet flat on the floor. Take everything off your lap. And just allow yourselves to relax. Feel with each breath you take, feel yourselves feeling more and more relaxed. More and more centered. More and more balanced. You feel that energy of love that is you. You feel it rise up within the center of your being, growing more stronger with every moment, until all that you see and feel and know is that divine love. I know within me I have the ability to rise up and practice vertical thinking whenever something difficult happens to me personally, to people that I love, or within the world. I know that there is a power and a presence within me that will support me in seeing truth, support me in rising above, and most of all, support me in things that I'm having difficulty releasing, difficulty letting go of. I know the truth of my being. I know that I am a divine expression of God manifest in the world. Yet I forget. The world distracts me from truth. And I allow the Holy Spirit to help me make that shift and change my perception whenever I need it. And now I allow myself to move deeper and deeper into the silence. And I just listen.